So basically, there was a paper for 1994 that looks at why violence happened against Native Americans the way it did. And what I want to do is I basically expand on their paper and identify two variables that they did not look at. And one is election cycles, and the second is gold mining. So there are three books, and what these books they do is they catalog violent incidences between natives and settlers. And then they just have it in a list with the date and the place. And there are three data sources, and so I just call them small, medium, large for sake of ease. And that has the year's number of conflicts. And here is what it looks like per year. And so you can see that you have this wide variation in the number of conflicts between settlers and Native Americans. And so what I want to explain is try to explain why does this vary so much. One variable that I identified is the election cycle. So if you look at the election year, there is a spike in violence against Native Americans. And if you look at these data sets here, if you take the average for these 3 years, it's roughly about 20, and then it goes up to about 30. So you have about a 50% increase of violence in the election years. Now, what I'm looking at here with the election years is based on a work of this Hess and Orphanides. And so in 1995, they looked at U.S. warfare when the U.S. goes to war. And they said that the state of the economy really matters. So if the economy is in a recession and a president wants to win an election, you have to show you're a strong leader, so you go to war. If the economy is not in a recession, then you don't have to go to war because you've already shown that you're a good leader. So basically, I'm copying their work and taking the other work and putting them together for this section. And so if you look from 1830 to 1897, these are my regressions with the different data sets. And you can see that during a recession, violence goes up. So this is a kind of regression you can read those coefficients as like a percent. So for the large data set, violence goes up against Native Americans by about 20%. And then if you truncate the data, you get an even larger effect because violence had decreased a lot by the 1880s. All right, so here we're going to look at the state level. So before this was an aggregated time trend. This is at the state level. So it's costly to go kill people, right? It's hard to kill someone. The natives know the land better. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of money. So why would you actually go out and fight someone? So one reason is gold. So gold was discovered in the West, these 12 states, and you have a long time frame. So 1848 to 1875, you had gold is discovered. And so what I did was for all these 12 states, the first year here is when gold is mined. And so if you look at the number of conflicts, before gold is ever mined, you have very low levels of conflicts. Then afterwards, you see this huge spike. Now, one confounding factor is that maybe this isn't gold, it's just the presence of settlers. So here's some very brief history. So in Washington State, the first settlers arrived in 1843, gold mining 1853, and then you have conflicts after gold is mined, but then you have none afterwards. So in other words, there's no conflicts until there's gold, and then you get fighting. Oregon, it's mostly the same. You have about 20 years of settlers in the state with only one conflict, and then you get gold mining, and then you get 12 more. Idaho, I put Idaho here because prospectors to get to Washington and Oregon went through Idaho, and there were zero conflicts until you get gold in Idaho, and then again you get skirmishes. Wyoming's the last one. It's the same thing. You get hundreds of thousands of migrants go across Wyoming through the Rocky Mountains. They found the passes. There are very few skirmishes, so there's 6 right there. But then after gold mining, you get 32 over a decade. So these are the regressions. So it's a panel form. So it's like by state and by year, how many conflicts are there. And so you note that this seems wrong because this is saying that there's fewer people killed and wounded. And down here, it's not very significant. So I was a little surprised by this. And then when I looked at the data a little closer, it is due to Custer's last stand. So gold was discovered in South Dakota. And the worst violence between natives and Americans happened in the data fighting over this gold. But the problem is the gold was fought over in Montana, not in South Dakota. So what I do here is I simply drop Dakota, the Dakotas and Montana. And you can see that now you have a positive, significant, large effect of fighting or gold mining and violence. And then here what I do is I give Montana 2 gold discoveries and the Dakotas 0 because fighting over Dakota gold happened in Montana. And here you get significance at the 1% level for all of these. And these are large effects. Again, so like for this one, so 5 years after the discovery of gold, you have a 40% increase of violent conflicts. or here the biggest one, you have 145% increase of those killed in conflicts between the US and Native Americans. So in conclusion, violence, it can be very costly to engage in, so why would you go fight and possibly lose your life? So here I have two main variables. So one is election cycle, so the president just sends you out, so that way he can look better by saying he's doing something. And the second is gold discoveries, right? It makes it a lot more profitable to go out and fight. And so my last point here is that in this short paper, Leeson and his co-authors, they point out that economists like to use public defense as your typical public good. And so we need public defense, to protect everyone. But they say we overestimate the value of public defense because we miss that public defense can also lead to public offenses. And I think that's relevant here in fighting Native Americans.